This week on Inside Olympia, what's it like to be a freshman legislator? We'll meet 4 of Washington's newer members of the state legislature. Why do they want to serve? What are their policy priorities? And what has surprised them? That and more when we sit down with 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats.
From the TVW studio, it's Inside Olympia with host Austin Jenkins.
Welcome to Inside Olympia. Recent years have brought a lot of new faces to Washington's legislature and a generational shift. What's inspiring people to run to serve in Olympia these days? What are their policy priorities? What are the challenges and opportunities they are discovering? Joining me this week are 2 panels of newer state legislators. In our second half, we'll talk with 2 Republicans. But joining me first are 2 Democrats, State Representatives Osman Salahuddin and Brianna Thomas. Welcome to Inside Olympia. Good to see you both. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So let's start with just kind of getting oriented. What comes to mind is why you wanted to run and sort of the districts you represent. And I mentioned in the introduction this sort of generational shift, which the 2 of you clearly are representative of. So let's just start with that. Like there's a lot of things you can be doing in life besides serving in a state legislature. What motivated this?
Thank you, Austin. So Representative Brianna Thomas from the Fightin' 34th.
I noticed you call it the Fightin' 34th.
I do call it that.
Yes,
That's what they send us here to do.
Okay.
I think, honestly, the reelection of Trump as president created a shockwave in my community. We all got through the first administration together. We got through as unscathed as possible. And with Project 2025 on the horizon, the palpable fear in my community and a sense of helplessness is what drove me into the fire, if you will. I'm not a do-nothing kind of lady. I come from a long, long line of public servants. And, we've got the Mr. Rogers attitude, look for the helpers. And there was an opportunity for me to be a helper.
Just briefly, a little bit about your district.
Oh, well, it's just the best district in Washington State.
We've got... So not just the Fightin', but the fabulous, huh?
The Fightin' and fabulous 34th. That's right. My district is wildly diverse. I've got quite a bit of the downtown core, Seattle City Hall and Pioneer Square are in my district. I've got both of the stadiums, the Port, Georgetown, South Park, unincorporated King County with White Center, 5 blocks of Burien, and about 36 square miles of Vashon, in addition to all of West Seattle. So I've got pretty traditional urban areas, and then I've got goats and septic tanks and wishes for gondolas.
That is quite a diverse district. That is an interesting mix. And some ferry rides to get to meet your constituents.
Absolutely.
Okay. Representative Salahuddin, same question, sort of what motivated, I think I heard you say that you are the youngest current serving state legislator.
Absolutely, yeah.
Are you going to reveal your age?
I can absolutely reveal my age, and I think during session I will have aged by 1 more year. So,
okay.
Representative Osman Salahuddin, I have the opportunity and pleasure of representing the 48th Legislative District, which includes the downtown cores of Bellevue, Redmond, Kirkland, and the surrounding communities, including the Points communities, Medina, Clyde Hill, Yarrow Point, and Hunts Point. And one thing that I'm incredibly proud of is that not only am I the youngest representative, currently 29, I grew up in this district. It shaped who I am. It helped me become the person I am today, and I'm very grateful to give back to this community. That's one of the reasons I chose to serve is, the community has changed in so many ways, whether it's the influx of workers to our region, the opportunities in housing and transit. Really want to give a shout out to the light rail that opened up in the district last year. And when I saw the changes happening, there was not as much of representation of those younger voices, those newer families, and specifically, I currently serve as the only South Asian in the House and the first Muslim ever to be elected to the House of Representatives, and those are perspectives that I want to offer to the legislature. Representative Thomas mentioned it really well. A lot of change has happened from seeing our presidential elections shifting, seeing community understanding the deepening need for affordability at all levels. I want to make sure that myself, my colleagues, we can provide a lens that maybe has not been heard before. And I have also heard about gondolas in my district as well.
I want to know more. What kind of gondolas? Where would they go?
Right.
So when you think about, you've talked about sort of the motivation for running, and then and by the way, as you know, you were both initially appointed to your seats and then had to run in special elections, and will have to run again. I'll do the talking about that because I know you can't talk about it in your official capacity, but just for orientation here. How does this translate then? You've got the motivation, right? But how does it then translate in terms of what you want to accomplish when you get to Olympia, and sort of what you can do, especially, in these short sessions where things, start out with a bang, the cutoffs come really quickly, there's a budget shortfall and kind of limited money to spend. So how are you evaluating sort of the best way you can make impact?
Well, I think I'd start off by saying we clearly don't know any different. Last year being our first session, there was a substantive budget shortfall that year as well. So we came in just knowing your ideas have to pencil, or they have to build off of the good work someone else has already done. And so, for instance, I was able to work on a bill that supported breaks, meal and rest breaks for nurses and healthcare workers. That was a trailer bill. Trailer bill, for those who are watching and may not know, is a follow-up cleanup bill. There were some things that were left on the table that I knew would actually make people's lives better in the immediate, and had support from the communities that were impacted. So you sort of start there on what can I help with that's already been done. But then you do get these big ideas. It's my second session, and I've got a constitutional amendment based on my observations and lived experiences last session. It seems to me that the way we do business hasn't been meaningfully taken a look at since we were an agrarian economy. We are now obviously a technology economy, and so I think it's prudent to see if the way we do business needs a tune-up as well.
Well, you got to tell us a little bit more about this constitutional amendment. By the way, that would take a 2/3 vote of the legislature, and I believe ratification by the voters.
People.
Yes,
Absolutely.
But what's your proposal?
It's very simple. It simply empowers the legislature to set its own schedule. Doesn't say what that schedule is, doesn't say when it has to meet or how we have to meet. It simply empowers us as the body that's doing the work to have that discussion amongst members about whether or not the system as it's currently prescribed is actually working for people who want to serve.
So you think the 60-day or 105-day and 60-day sessions may be a little antiquated, maybe a little limiting for a modern-day 21st century legislature?
Well, and people like us that are willing to serve and do bring some subject matter expertise to the table. I've been working in government directly for 10 years and in political environs for 16, so I may be a little more seasoned than I look. But you've got folks that are low-wage workers, you've got working parents, you've got other types of folks in Washington that have a lot to contribute to these conversations. Doing it on a farmer schedule isn't going to work for everyone.
Okay. Interesting. How's it going whipping those votes?
Well, we're not quite to 2/3, but Walsh and I had matching sweater vests last week in support.
Oh, that's interesting. You're referring to Representative Walsh from the
From the 19th.
Yeah, okay.
That's the one.
other side of the aisle, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
That's the only way we're going to get things done.
That's true. Okay. Similar question. I don't know if you can top a constitutional amendment to change the legislative schedule, but what is you sort of see, okay, I know it motivated me to come down here, but now let me see if the rubber hits the road. Let me see if I can make some policy. What does that start to look like?
No, that's a great question. I was appointed last year with 6 days to go before session started. I know Representative Thomas came actually during session. And so we had some learning pains, making sure that we got the right legislation forward, the right conversations with stakeholders. I'm very fortunate to say I got 6 bills passed last year, which, one for every day that I had leading up to session maybe. But the trail end of that conversation, working across the aisle is incredibly important for me. The first bill that I got passed was actually unanimous in the House and the Senate, signed by the governor to actually allow for judges to give more discretion when sentencing folks who are perpetrators of rape resulting in pregnancy. Not an issue I came into the session as one of my top line priorities, but having conversations with stakeholders and talking to folks that had lived experience, it showed me that this is something that is missing, a gap in our ability to enforce the law.
Just to be clear, was this to allow judges to go outside the sentencing guidelines and impose a tougher sentence if they felt it was appropriate in that case?
Exactly. And these are, when I'm looking at crimes in our society, it was currently capped at the judges having that discretion to victims under the age of 18. And I said, the age has nothing to do with it. It's the severity of the crime. These are women that are dealing with not just the physical toll, but emotional and mental toll as well. So, talking with the King County Sexual Assault Resource Center, this just made sense. And that's the beauty of what the legislature provides. This year, we have issues that vary in many degrees. One of my top line priorities is immigrant and refugee support. And as we see across the country, as we're seeing in Washington state, action needs to be taken. And we have a lot of legislation that we're prioritizing, but it takes those conversations with community stakeholders. It takes conversations across the board to be able to get that over the finish line.
How are you navigating, because you mentioned the idea of working in bipartisan fashion, but on some of this response to the Trump administration's immigration policies and some of the proposals that the Democrats have put forth, you don't have Republican support, and you stand up on the floor and make your case for something, and they may get up and argue the opposite. How do you sort of navigate one day working with the other side of the aisle and the next day not seeing eye to eye?
Absolutely. Well, I will say one of the bills that I just had pass off the House floor did have some Republican votes looking at the use of shared leave for immigration hearings and proceedings, which was great to see that a statewide leave program can have that opportunity to be used. And I have a bill looking at automatic license plate reader data regulations and data privacy. From the Senate, it's coming over as the vehicle, or for the audience, that's what's going to be moving is the Senate bill 6002. Exactly. And that has bipartisan support. Senator Holy is number 2 on the bill. And so as we're looking at specifically that legislation, for example, I took examples from Republican-led bills across the country to try to get language in our legislation that can work for everyday residents. This is not about party. This is a data privacy issue. And if we're looking at whether it's federal immigration enforcement, whether it's data privacy locally, we need to get issues like this right for our residents in Washington state to feel safe.
How, let's stick with sort of the milieu here in Olympia, and I'm always interested, because you're only new once, in sort of first impressions, and whether it's what surprised you or what's different than what you imagined when you were not in the legislature, or what's funny or confusing, but what has these early days been like?
I think the thing that surprised me the most,
besides the fact you think it's antiquated the way that they run the calendar.
Besides that, I think there are just little rules and behaviors, sort of status quo and culture that you don't know until you get it wrong. Behavior on the floor, for instance, so walking between a speaker and the presiding speaker, that'll get you gavelled.
It's a big no-no, right?
It's a big no-no. Actually saying the word Senate on the floor of the House of Representatives.
I'd forgotten that
We
one.
don't do that one either. So I think
You have to refer more generically to
the chamber across the rotunda.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So I think sort of those norms, those really like ticky-tacky human things where you get kind of impassioned about the speech you're giving on the floor and you lose sight of there are some expectations of decorum. And then I think the other thing that was really surprising to me is how often, quite frankly, I'll disagree with members of my own party. I expected it to be a little more, we're a big tent, so we're the same tent, and you'd be amazed at the diversity of ideas that the party itself holds, which does sometimes create some tension, but it gives you that opportunity to figure out how to work together in a more productive way. I'm looking forward to advancing the Domestic Worker Bill of Rights this year. I believe it's on its 6th attempt. I am its 3rd sponsor. Just the history of the discussion of where these workers fit, again, in our economy, brought forward a lot of questions and opportunities to collaborate inside of my own party before really being able to meaningfully reach across the aisle.
Yeah, whether it's the rules of decorum that kind of, can trip you up and you're trying to figure that out, or picking up the mantle from, somebody else who's been working an issue and sort of hands it off to you. Maybe it's like the relay race, right? Like you take the baton now. But the same idea, same question. Is there something about, especially because we do live in these very polarized times, as they say now, all politics is national, which is the inverse of what at least I was taught growing up, which is all politics is local. And then you come down here to Olympia and you're bringing together people from every corner of the state under one dome. It's an interesting place to be. It's an interesting place to work. So what struck you, surprised you, interested you when you got here?
Absolutely, and it's interesting that you said the all politics is national sentiment is, I grew up learning about local politics before local government, before everything at the national level, and I was fortunate enough to serve on the Redmond City Council prior to joining here in the legislature, and one of the surprises is just how different these levels of government operate. There are a lot more rules of decorum that we have to follow, but the partisan nature and maybe the polarizing nature of what state-level government versus local government shows has been a big surprise. But on a similar note to what Representative Thomas said, I think it's, while we're having and building these relationships with colleagues in our own caucus, it has been really good to work across the aisle on a lot of important issues. We noted a few pieces of legislation that we're working on across the aisle with Republicans, but Representative Thomas matched sweaters with Representative Walsh. There's a lot of opportunity to collaborate when we're thinking about everyday Washingtonians, whether it's Democrats, Republicans, anyone in between, and we need to get past sort of this polarizing nature of national government, frankly, and try to get back to the core values that we as Washingtonians, I believe, all hold true. And that's the most surprising thing is it's sometimes hard to get there, but once you're having conversations, building relationships, walls tend to come down, and you can have more candid conversations about what's truly important.
Like the need for food trucks on the Capitol campus.
Yes,
I think that's something we can all agree on.
You want a little more variety, a little more choice for lunchtime, huh?
Well, not just us, for everybody that's visiting too.
Yeah. So I'm also interested in your districts and how you're thinking about representing your districts, but then also being Democrats in large caucuses. And I like the fact that you brought up the fact that there is diversity. We don't often get to see that because a lot of that happens behind closed doors in caucus. But there's those dynamics. But at the end of the day, you are representing your constituents back home. Your districts, it's interesting. We've got an urban Seattle district that also gets to sort of rural Vashon and Maury Islands, and then, as you noted, unincorporated parts of King County. You've got the east side, the sort of tech hub, and very sort of suburban Seattle, east side of the lake. Let's kind of compare and contrast some of the issues where there might be sort of unique to each of your districts and maybe where there's some overlap. I know you mentioned housing.
Yeah, well, I know that many in my district won't like being called suburban Seattle, so that's one thing there.
There we go. I take it back.
Yeah, no, and when we say east side, folks in Spokane say,
right. Which east side are we talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
So how would you refer?
I claim east side. I'll say east side. Senator Riccelli did not agree, but
Senator Riccelli of Spokane objects.
Exactly.
Respectfully so.
Respectfully.
Yes.
I'll say, a lot of the priorities that we have are similar in terms of, I keep bringing back affordability, immigrant and refugee support and protections. When it comes to housing, we have a pretty robust plan in the three downtown cores of Bellevue, Redmond, and Kirkland, as I mentioned, on linking transit and access to housing to communities that have historically in these cities not had the opportunity to afford to live there just because of single-family zoning, and we're getting to a place where multifamily and transit-oriented development is getting to the core of our housing structure in these cities. A lot more affordable housing for seniors, and I'm fortunate to have a bill this year as well to expand the land access to where housing can be built. And right now, faith-based land, we're chock full of it in our communities, and a lot of congregations are dwindling. House Bill 1859 opens up affordable housing provisions for density bonuses to make sure that developers can actually build on this land and provide meaningful, affordable housing for our communities.
Just to briefly follow up on that, how specific do you think that is sort of to the nature of your district?
Yes.
Versus how applicable might that be in other parts of the state, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Representative Thomas has a district downtown Seattle as well that might be more similar than other parts. You noted the tech hub and having as many jobs as we have, I think our population, I don't want to quote a number, but population grows significantly during the daytime. And so making sure that we have adequate need for that daytime childcare, the restaurants, the small businesses that can be supported when folks join the community for these jobs. It is very different, and we're seeing not just the influx of these tech positions, but influx of economic vitality in general. So, one of the votes that I took last year was a no on the B&O tax, and I'm very supportive of progressive revenue. And when we're looking at different types of taxation, regressive taxes, et cetera. Business and occupation tax is one of the most regressive taxes that our state has the opportunity to put forward because it's constitutional right now. That's one that I talk to so many small business owners in our community about the way that it would impact their bottom line. And I mentioned, I'll give my dad a shout out here. He's a small business owner. Talking with him, a lot of his colleagues, these are real conversations that I'm having every single day. And the votes that we're taking here in Olympia will matter to my district, to districts across the state. But I'm just very proud to be from the 48th.
Okay. Representative Thomas, same question when you think about your district and its particular needs and sort of some of what you're proposing because of that, but maybe also would scale to other parts of the state.
Yeah, I think two of the major things that are really top of mind for my district right now is access to childcare. As Representative Salahuddin mentioned, we've got young families, growing families trying to stay in Seattle, and you've got folks registering for childcare the day they find out they're expecting and still finding themselves on waiting lists. And that's folks
Yeah,
who
you're saying like 9 months before.
To the day,
Yeah,
in
to
some
the day,
instances.
and then it's like.
And you still might have to
You
wait.
might have to wait, yeah.
And that's folks who have the resources to know where those lists are, source them, and get on them. That doesn't even include our low-wage workers, our transit-oriented workforce, which I like to think about, because Seattle brings in a lot of folks from the neighborhoods and the communities to the south, to the north, to east even. Some of them come over. And where they're going to keep their kids safe and making sure they have access to affordable, accessible childcare is huge. Also, we've got the creative economy. I mean, we are in Seattle. We do have a film studio on Harbor Island. We do have, a couple of buskers left. We do have carvers and painters and singers and jugglers, oh my, on our waterfront. And making sure that we're creating spaces for those folks to flourish and create and share their art. And one of the things that makes Seattle Seattle is the music and the artisans. And so I think we've got quite a bit of that in my district that may show up in our economy in different ways to other parts of the state. And I would be remiss and absolutely hear about it if I didn't invoke the reality of being a ferry-based district. My district touches 8 other districts, given just the shape and size of it, and 3 of those are ferry-based communities as well. Primarily, I'm thinking about the 26th legislative district. Folks being able to get off and on the island, to go to their jobs, to get to their appointments, to see their families, to have dinner downtown or catch a show is definitely one of the major issues that the Fighting and Fabulous 34th is always tackling.
Representative Salahuddin talked about breaking, I guess, with the vote on the B&O tax. Can you think of, and just going back because you have me sort of fascinated by this idea now of sort of the different intra-party tensions that exist, can you think of a vote or an issue on which you broke from fellow Democrats or from, a cohort of your Democrats, sort of where, because I do think people, you start to, you see the D and the R next to the name and think kind of monolith. But as we sort of get the nuances to emerge here, what are some ways that you have asserted sort of your independence from the caucus, would you say?
Sure. Well, and also this goes back to the decorum. So I took a vote last year. The traditional thinking for the party last year was there was a proposal to essentially vacate a previously submitted request for a constitutional convention. And it sits on this theoretical bar in the sky, and once you get a certain number of them, it triggers a review of our national constitution. There was a move to vacate Washington's previous submissions to that bar, and I voted no because I'm a history teacher's daughter, and I felt like other people were doing plenty of erasure, and we didn't need to participate in that. And quite frankly, I think our Constitution might need a tune-up, although I'm not calling for that today or anytime soon. But I think that just startled some people. That wasn't expected. It's not necessarily a deeply held value of my district. I'm just that kind of nerd.
Okay, great. And just in the last couple of minutes we have left, I want you to put your professional hats on and tell us a little bit about what you do outside the legislature and how that's also informed the work you do. We'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm in a really unique perspective. I am a dual legislator and law student at the University of Washington.
Wow.
So I'm a first-year law student right now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Graduated from the University of Washington 8 years back. Go Huskies. In between then, I've had multiple different careers. Worked as a medical device consultant. I have a neuroscience degree, so wanted to stay in that healthcare medicine field, but eventually realized that public service was calling, and went to go work for King County Council member Sarah Perry as her communications and community engagement manager. And that's really where I got to know the district at a deeper level from just having grown up there and having served on Redmond City Council shortly thereafter. I think I got a really good perspective of what it means to serve and want to continue doing that, while also understanding that the legal profession is ever growing and wanting to offer my input into that as well.
Are you taking the quarter off, or what are you doing during
I'm
session?
a hybrid student, so I'm taking just a few credits, doing my assignments in the evening.
That's you might be the first on that too. You said youngest and maybe the first active law student. Although I think there was a state senator who may have.
There have been a few,
Yeah.
not in recent memory, but a few who make sure they let me know.
Yes. Okay. What about you? Same question. Sort of kind of where the professional background.
Sure. Well, just starting with my experience here in Olympia, I was a page, and then I was an intern, and then I was a session aide, and now I'm a member. So we've covered all the stops
all
on
the
that
bases,
journey.
yep, okay.
But in my day job, I've worked for the city of Seattle for 10 years, everything ranging from being the chief of staff to, or at the time, city council president. I just came out of the previous mayor's office, and I currently work in the Human Services Department on policy and program advising on issues such as gun violence interruption, fentanyl response, occasional housing, and all things labor. So again, I'm just like a public service nerdy girl real hard. So these two jobs actually work really well together to give me that 360 multi-level of government perspective on if I have a great idea here, but I know what it takes to implement it at home, whether or not it really is that great of an idea.
Yeah. There will be a vetting process, right? You will find out. Representative Thomas, Representative Salahuddin, thank you both. Really appreciate the conversation. Good luck as you finish up the session here. Thanks for talking with us. And when we return, we talk with two Republicans who are also new to the legislature. Back after this.
There's been losses every year since the early 1920s. The shoreline itself was almost 2 miles further out there. Year after year, more homes would fall in the water. We have nothing to lose.
Welcome back to Inside Olympia. This week we are talking with freshman lawmakers about what brought them to the legislature and their impressions thus far. Joining me now are two first-term Republicans, Deb Manjarrez and Hunter Abell, both state representatives. Good to see you both. Thanks for being here. Interesting contrast, I'll note right away, because we just had two West Side Democrats from different districts, but you're both from, and we joked about what East Side means. Is that the east side of Seattle, or is that the east side? So you're from the east side of the state. Let's start with your districts, and then we'll find out more about you. But I think it's nice to kind of place people. So do you want to start off, Representative Abell? Like your district always interests me because it's so large.
Yeah, it's a huge district. First of all, thank you for letting us be here. Yeah. It's the 7th district, which is all of Northeast Washington and most of North Central Washington. It's fully 20% of the landmass of the state of Washington, and it's larger than 9 U.S. states. So huge district, all are part of 7 counties.
And why don't you just, for fun, tell us how many hours it takes you to get from home to Olympia?
Well, it's exaggerated a little bit because there's no way to get there pretty much close to as the crow would fly. I take a ferry boat across the Columbia River, so it depends on catching the ferry. So typically about 7 hours to get from home to Olympia.
And just last question, are you carpooling with your colleagues from the 7th? I know that's been historically that's happened.
We carpool a fair bit, not for purposes of coming over to session, so frequently because we're going back and forth and need to have a little bit of flexibility on our own, but we do carpool quite a bit.
Around the district.
Right.
Okay, good. Representative Manjarrez, same question. Let's place you in the state,
Yes.
the Yakima Valley.
Yes, thank you for having me. So yes, Yakima Valley. I'm from Wapato, right in the middle of the Yakima Valley, right on the Indian Reservation. I've lived there my whole life. The 14th, though, goes from Klickitat. We grab not Goldendale, but like Lyle and Centerville up there, and then we come and grab all the Yakima Indian Reservation. A little bit east, Yakima, Union Gap, Wapato, Toppenish, Grandview, Sunnyside, and then comes and grabs a little bit of east Pasco. It's probably 4 hours from one end to the other of that new 14th district.
And it is a new district, newly drawn.
It is.
More newly drawn district.
That's correct.
What do you do when you're not legislating?
What I do in my other career, I'm a certified public accountant, and I have been for 40 years. I have my own firm. My adult daughter is my partner, which is lovely. I get to work with my daughter for the rest of my life. And my husband and I farm. We still grow some apples.
Okay, very good. So a little accounting, a little orcharding.
That's right.
Okay. Same question for you. What do you do when you're not legislating?
Yeah, a number of hats. So I live on a multi-generation family ranch located on the Colville Indian Reservation, and Deb and I have talked about that before.
That's an interesting parallel here.
It is,
Yeah.
both privileged to live on reservations and the blessings that involves. Professionally, I'm an attorney. I practice at a regional firm called Williams Kastner, and I've been there, my goodness, about 15 years now, so a while. And then I'm also a reservist in the United States Navy.
Okay. So then let's get to the question of why you wanted to run. And maybe I'll start with you, Representative Abell, because I know that you also have a young family. And so I'm always interested to know about sort of the sacrifice that's involved. And it's more so when you're farther away, and there's more distance to cover. What motivated and prompted this? I know you served as a judge, if I recall, in your home area.
That's right. I had the privilege of serving as the judge for Ferry County District Court.
Okay.
So the opportunity to do justice in my hometown, my home community. It was a wonderful job.
Yeah, the commute's good.
The commute was good.
Yeah,
It was
right.
still an hour 15,
Okay.
one way. So it took a while, but I'd go in there and it would be people I went to high school with, people I played football with, that sort of thing. So, and it was neat to help build the trust and confidence in the community and what we were doing there in the court system. So that was a tremendous honor. It was difficult to set that aside and decided to run for this office, but I felt passionately about the issues that are facing our state. I want to make it better, and I think this is the way to do it. And
This is the seat that Joel Kretz held.
that's correct. Yeah. So my
Longtime
predecessor
state
was Joel
legislator
Kretz.
and leader in the Republican
Yeah,
caucus.
wonderful leader for the caucus, the cowboy from Wakanda. There's no replacing him for sure. And these are big shoes, and I take it seriously. But what really motivated me for running for this position was I have a family tradition of military service and public service, and I wanted to follow that. And then you mentioned I've got two beautiful little girls. In fact, not so little. My oldest sang the national anthem here at the Capitol when we convened a couple
fun.
of weeks ago. So
Oh,
that
that's
was neat.
great.
So they are huge motivators for me.
Yeah. What is I'll ask you about kind of that sacrifice of being here during session with a family. How do you manage that?
It does involve a sacrifice. I am very blessed. I've got friends and family who have been willing to drive the kids back and forth. I do a tremendous amount of driving to go see the kids. If I can't do my job as a dad, I can't do my job here in Olympia as a legislator. So that's the deal I've got.
Right.
And so I've got a lot of people on the team helping make it happen.
Okay. Representative Manjarrez, same question about kind of what motivated you to run, to sacrifice coming over to Olympia. Sounds like you're pretty busy as is.
I am. And the hardest part of this job is actually being away from my family. That's the one. It's not the work. I enjoy the work, but it's being away from my family, and I'm only 3 hours away. But I was always involved. I came from Wapato, small little town, involved in the Chamber of Commerce there for like 10 or 12 years, always promoting my little city and, helped start the Tamale Festival, which was just a little community, another community festival sort of thing to help bring more people to Wapato. So I was always involved in the community, and I was actually recruited to fill this spot because I am busy during that time, but no, I didn't like the
Well,
way.
yeah, and I didn't even really think about that. This is tax season.
This is tax season.
So how are you?
Because they did wonderful last year during the long session. My team did wonderful. I have about 5 people there, and they handled it without me just fine. So they probably liked it better because I'm kind of walk into the room and go, I need this now. Yeah, I didn't like the way the state. I hadn't liked the way the state was headed in its leadership for a very long time, and we needed some common sense. So that was really my motivating factor.
Well, that's a nice entree to sort of the next kind of question is you're Republicans in a state legislature that is controlled by Democrats, not quite 2/3 majorities, but very large majorities. So when you're thinking about, and I've asked legislators this question, right direction, wrong direction. Sounds like you'd answer, we're heading in the wrong direction. So as a Republican in the minority, where do you think you can make a difference? How do you think you can, if you've come here to make some change, how do you do that when you're not part of the majority?
No, you do. You do it steps at a time. You do it steps at a time. We've got such big jobs in front of us. This drug crisis, which turns into the homeless crisis. We've done a lot of work, but we have to change. We have to look at every program we ever put out there, and we have to look at it. Is it doing what it's intended to do? And that's a big job. We've got to change one thing at a time. The taxation, our people are just burdened with the cost of living in this state. And there's lots of hidden, the cost of living in this state has been caused by the laws that have come out of this bill, the legislature for the past 30, 40 years. I mean, I'll give you an example. The Growth Management Act, that was a complete takeover of private property rights. That's what it was. And to take all the control away from local cities and counties who know what that land use should be used for. And it was a complete, and in the very beginning it said, no, you can't divide that piece of property. No, you can't build a house there, and no, you can't build a house there. And where are we now? We're putting Band-Aids because we don't have enough housing. And had we let the people in the local communities decide those things, I believe we wouldn't be there. The same thing with the Climate Commitment Act. Everything we use in our life is delivered to our store in a truck using gas or diesel. I mean, and so when you think about that, that's added what? It went from 50 to 70 cents, depending on what the auction's happening, a gallon. That increases the price of everything from tomatoes to toothpaste to our shoes to our clothes. And that's a hidden tax out there, and our people can't see that. I mean, look what it's done to our schools.
So let me go back to just where do you think you can make, because, I mean, you're talking about signature policies of the Democrats, the Climate Commitment Act. I mean, that was the governor priority. So probably not going to repeal that, but where do you think you can make, and maybe the housing issue is the best one to go back to, because I haven't heard talk of sort of opening up the Growth Management Act again, although some people have talked about that, but there is clearly interest in looking at some of our zoning laws and figuring out, how can we increase supply. So where do you think you might be able to?
So in my district, we need more homes for that first home buyer. Okay, maybe 1,500 to 1,700 square foot homes. We do. We actually have a bill I'm co-sponsor on with another representative from the 7th, talking about allowing truly the local government, city and counties, to make some changes. Don't have to accept what the state building codes are, the energy codes. Allow them to make those choices and bring the cost of those houses down.
So it's sort of an exemption or some flexibility from the state standards.
That's right.
Okay.
So little steps.
Mm-hmm. Representative Abell, same question. Kind of issues that are animating you or your district, specific bill or two that you think is reflective of that?
Yeah, well, a number of issues certainly animating me and my district. Some big ones, of course, the state of the state, how we're doing, how our economy is, the affordability issues we have in our state. Real concern about the tax burden in our state. It took about 130 years for us to get to a budget of around $35 billion and then another 10 to double that. So we have really dramatically increased the size and the scope of state budget in the last 10 years, and people are, I think, rightly asking, are they seeing the return on the investments in things like education, public safety, transportation? And I think they are seeing that they're not seeing an appropriate return on that investment. So this goes to kind of the question you were asking before, is there a better way to do this? And I think there is. And I think that's part of the job of the minority, is to speak constructively but forthrightly that there is a better way to do things than how the majority is running it currently. And that's certainly something I'm trying to do. Where can I make a particular difference? So my background is the military, of course, and I think there is broad bipartisan interest in supporting our veteran community. I've got a couple of bills on that subject. One reorganizes the Veterans Affairs Advisory Committee, and I'm happy to say that passed unanimously off the House last week and is over in the Senate. And hoping to get that to the governor's desk. I've also got a bill that I'm very passionate about, as is the veterans community. This is House Bill 2514 that would establish a permanent memorial here on the Capitol campus for the roughly 150 to just shy of 300 Washingtonians who lost their lives in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. So this would be a memorial that joins the war memorials to those lost in World Wars I and II and Korea and
Korean War,
Vietnam.
yeah.
So
Right.
tremendous support for that. In fact, it may be the bill with the most bipartisan co-sponsors this session.
Oh,
I've
wow.
not seen one with more.
Okay.
And I've been asking the clerk, and so
Right.
far he can't prove me wrong. So I'm just going to say it. It's the most
Yeah.
bipartisan bill in the session right now.
What are some other ways? I was, talking with your counterparts, the Democrats, who were talking about, options that they've seen, opportunities they've seen to work with Republicans, co-sponsor bills and whatnot. They don't have to do that. They don't need your votes, but they were indicating that that was important to them, where they can find that opportunity. You do need Democratic support to get bills across the aisle, and I'm just curious about, especially because we live in such polarized and partisan times, given sort of this deep-seated belief that Democrats, from your perspective, have made some bad choices, and yet you come into this environment and it can be pretty collegial, and you can find some commonalities and some friendships across the aisle, and you need their votes. So how does that start to manifest? Have you found some Democrats you think you can work with, that you can respect, even if you don't always agree with their policies?
Yes, I have. In fact, I have two bills this year that I believe will get across the finish line that has bipartisan support. So yes, more in your second year. The first year you're just figuring out how it works and how to get it from point A to point B. But no, there's several that I've worked with across the aisle this year, and it was quite enjoyable. I mean, it comes down to the bill itself and what it's going to do, and so I think that's the key.
Can you give us an example of a bill or two here?
Yes, so there's two. One's a labor and industry bill, which labor and industry inspects all off-site manufactured housing, which could be RVs, campers, and of course the manufactured housing. So we were sending inspectors all over the country and the world to inspect those in person. This bill is going to allow us to use third-party inspectors. Hopefully they're already in those plants and so that should bring down the price of those units as they come into our consumers.
So just to be clear, these might be manufactured overseas, and we were sending you local inspectors to look at the as they're being
That's
built.
right.
Do they
You got to
meet
watch.
standard?
That's right. Well,
So
they're
you're-
open.
And that raises the cost of the final product.
You're right, because we were charging obviously the costs of those
So
inspections.
you're interested in third-party inspectors who could do that work on the ground. Okay.
And that's had some support. So no, that's probably going to get across the finish line.
Same question. I mean, you're from both of you are from such red portions of the state, and there is such difference. I mean, philosophically, right? The differences run deep between a Seattle Democrat and a Northeast Washington Republican, I would think. But what have you observed about the ability or the opportunities to work across the aisle and maybe even make a friend across the aisle?
Yeah, I think there are real opportunities there, and I think, I think both of us have worked hard on that this last year. To me, it seems that there are a couple of key ingredients to being successful there. One is to be genuine. I don't think we would succeed if we came here and were something different than who we are or who we ran as. I think that's really important. I'm a conservative. I'm proud of that. Two is to be constructive and professional. I think we as public servants have an obligation to model appropriate behavior, and I think people really want that in 2026. So we can engage in hard debates, hard discussions, tell truth to power, truth to the majority, but do so as a happy warrior, so to speak, and do it in a way that hopefully convinces people that there may be other ways to go here. I think another important thing is to try and enrich the debate, ennoble the conversation. And then lastly, I think it's really important that we say something new rather than just kind of continually saying the same talking points past each other. If you're able to do those things, I think there's a pretty good reservoir of folks on the other side who are anxious to engage in those conversations.
Is there anything that has surprised either of you or both of you about Olympia, about the way it works, about the rules of how you navigate this place? Do you have funny moments as you were trying to learn, the process of passing a bill, or just your way around the Capitol? Give us some inside stories about what it's been like to be new, because you're only new once.
Well, I'll jump in. I was astonished at, frankly, how beautiful our Capitol campus is. I paged as a high school student. I know one of your previous guests
Yes.
did as well. So that was a neat opportunity to come see just how beautiful our Capitol campus is. I think it's most beautiful in the country. But it had been many years since I've been back. And so I did come back. I brought my children. As you might recall, there's some kind of angled marble along the steps there. And so the moment they had the opportunity, they slid down it,
Go
as
sl-
thousands of
sliding.
children have
Yes,
before
right,
them.
right.
But it's a lovely building. It's filled with people who are trying to do the right things for their districts and for the state. And it's a place where we come to have big, significant debates about important public policy here in Washington. Honored to be here.
Okay. Do you have a story or a observation about just, what was maybe different than you thought it would be?
Oh, lots of things are different than I thought it would be. But no, we have fun. We have fun on the floor, and we have fun in caucus. We're all, if you can imagine, 98 type A personalities coming together. So those are the fun times. And in committee, we have fun, and you get gavelled because you didn't move the motion before you started talking the
right.
motion and that sort of thing. But the second year's definitely been more fun than the first.
What about communicating back to your district and sort of connecting the connective thread? It would seem that the farther you get from Olympia, the harder that might be. Or, the impression is, it's Olympia. Maybe they're not happy with the decisions that are being made. Now you've gone to Olympia. Are you part of the problem or part of the solution? How do you, I know you can send newsletters and you can have town halls and that kind of thing, but what are you finding as a way to try to bridge that distance?
Well, I'll jump in. So my district is huge and a long ways away.
Yeah.
And so for me, it seems that the most effective ways to communicate during session are we do send email updates. We engage in radio programs. My district listens to a lot of radio. And I hear from folks during the interim, I heard you on the radio.
They're driving around.
They are.
Listen
So
to radio, yeah.
good old-fashioned ways to communicate like that are wonderful. I do a lot of Facebook and social media. We've got a telephone town hall coming up here in a couple of weeks, which a lot of people historically attend. So that is good news. But people in the 7th District pretty regularly understand that when the legislators like Joel Kretz, my predecessor, would go to Olympia, it's kind of like they're on deployment. Again, that military background. You're on deployment for a while, and you'll be back when it's done. And so they'll expect to hear all the results when you're done with session. But in the meantime, telephone, social media, those are pretty much, and email are the best ways for me to stay in contact.
So be interim when you get back there. Just you gotta meet. You gotta go to all the different links of in your community, your hospitals, your schools, all of that,
The
and just
Rotaries,
talk with them. That's
yeah.
right. Just talk with them. You talk about how it works, and I love the interim meeting with all the people from my constituents.
Is there a particular issue, you've talked about some of the bills that you're each working on, but is there a particular issue in your communities that you've had to educate the folks here about? Again, because of the unique nature of, more rural, east of the mountains, that kind of thing. I think Representative Abell has a good answer for me.
How much time do you have? Yeah. My district is very unlike the vast majority of the districts here in Washington. It's inland, it's huge, it's primarily agricultural.
It does have a ferry, though.
It's got a couple of ferries, along that ply the Columbia River, yeah. It's an amazing district, largely agricultural, lots of farms, lots of ranches, not a lot of, towns of any size. Bordered by the north by Canada down to East Wenatchee, east to Idaho, and then west clear to the crest of the Cascades. So really massive. And so what that means is that a lot of times policy that's designed for urban or suburban Puget Sound districts is a one-size-fits-all approach that just doesn't work in the 7th District. So growth management is a great example where it just frankly doesn't work for much of the 7th District. A lot of our policies regarding agriculture, unfortunately, are having difficult, harmful impacts in the 7th District. And so that is a real challenge. What I do find is if I go to members of the majority and I say, let me educate you about my district, often they are very receptive. That doesn't always translate into an altered end legislative product, but it's part of my job as a member of the minority to keep trying and keep advocating for my district.
And I've got to believe that if you're succeeding Joel Kretz, you've probably picked up the baton of talking about wolves.
Yeah, and wolves, yes. Lest we forget about
Yes.
wolves, yeah.
As you say, we could talk for many hours about that. Anything in particular that is sort of an issue central to your district? I mean, you have a large district too. It's going to be diverse in terms of needs, but something that you've sort of brought to folks here and said, look, the area I represent, it's different, and here's how and here's why.
It's a heavy agricultural area, so I mean we have some tug of wars between labor and agriculture.
And there's bills always around farm worker rights and
That's
sort
right.
of
Those are becoming difficult because the ag prices and what's happening is the farmers are not making ends meet too. So yeah, but the thing I think back for the people in district is that they believe we have a little bit more power than we do. Okay, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? We have to work together, and we work, within the whole process of how from a bill starting to the committee and all of those things, and not being in the majority, we have to work a little bit harder. So.
The Democrats gave examples of issues or situations where maybe they broke a little bit with their own caucus or their own party. Can you? I mean, I realize yours is a smaller caucus, but can you think of a situation where, where you can sort of surface the diversity of thought within the Republican caucus? And if you don't have an answer, I understand, but I'm always curious about, you're not all a monolith.
Well, I'll jump in here. So you mentioned part of my background is serving as a district court judge. I view part of my role in this position as a legislator as to be an advocate for our judiciary and to try and help our judiciary work better. And sometimes we have big disagreements with the decisions that come out of the Temple of Justice or the Court of Appeals. And if we don't like, the interpretation of the law, we can try and write a new law. That's certainly something we can do. But, sometimes I fear that there is a bit of an anti-judicial rhetoric that you get from some quarters, not necessarily from our caucus, but I think you can hear it at a national level. And I am trying to be a voice saying, look, we need the rule of law. The judiciary is incredibly important. It's where we go in front of an impartial decision maker to get justice. I think the county courthouse is one of the most important buildings we've got in a county. And it's something that makes people want to live here in this country. And so we need to build up and support our judiciary, hold them to account when they get it wrong. But that's part of the voice that I'm trying to have here.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with most of our caucus. Like I said, conservative values. We need to have so I can't give you an specific example of breaking with the caucus on one of those things.
That's fine.
I just want all of our people in our districts to be able to own their own home and succeed in the American dream if that's what they want.
Okay. Just a couple minutes left, and I'll kind of give you each a last word about, serving in 2026, difficult times. I said to the prior panel, all politics is national now. What is it like to be an elected legislator in 2026? And what keeps you coming back thinking, I'm going to do this?
Well, I think I'm trying to be part of the antidote to the problem that all politics is national. National politics is certainly important, but I ran to serve as a state legislator. I'm passionate about my district. I'm passionate about this state. I'm very concerned about the path that we seem to be on. I think there's a better way for us to do things here in Olympia. And if we do the things that we talked about before, that incredible importance of being genuine, being factually accurate when talking with folks. If you don't know the answer, say, I don't know the answer, but let me do some homework and get back to you. Try and make the conversation better and, advance the conversation in some way. I think that is very helpful in changing the tone of the conversation. I remember when I ran in my campaign, I would talk to rooms full of Republican, Party activists. I would say, folks, we have to change how we think and talk about the other side. And heads would just go up and down. People would nod in agreement. And and so I think there's a deep desire, frankly, on both sides of the aisle, for us to change about how we talk and interact with folks who may not agree with us.
Okay. I'll give you the last word, just a few seconds.
Sure. No, you're right. But you're right. From the media standpoint, politics is national, but really the more effect on your life can happen right here at the state or even at the county level. It's real important, and we need to remind our folks about that sometimes, that what's happening
maybe all
right
politics
here.
is national, but a lot of policy is local.
That's right.
Or state.
That affect their
Okay.
lives.
Representatives Manjarrez and Abell, thank you so much for coming in. Appreciate the conversation. Good luck for the rest of the session,
Thank you
and
for
hope to
having
have you
us.
back on. Thank you for watching Inside Olympia. We'll see you again next week.